Thank you, Chair McCarty, Assembly Members Ting and Chavez. Hello again, and welcome to Assemblymember Kim to the committee. I look forward to working with all of you this year. My name is Ryan Storm. I am the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Budget for the CSU Chancellor's Office. Before I begin detailing the CSU support budget request and add comments to the Governor's multi-year funding plan, I'd like to take a few moments to provide you with some information and perspective on the California State University. Today, the CSU has 3 million living alumni that represent 1 in 10 employees in California and 1 in 20 university degree holders in the United States of America. It's a pretty big organization, pretty long history there to establish such a huge alumni base. Also consider that the 23 campuses of the CSU educate 447,000 students. We award over 100,000 degrees per year and nearly half of the state's baccalaureate degrees. We also employ 45,000 faculty and staff and sustain more than 150,000 jobs in the state. And the CSU operates a budget of approximately $4.9 billion annually. And overall, the CSU-related expenditures create more than $17 billion in economic activity. You know, the CSU has lived up to its purpose and promise in the California Master Plan for Higher Education. Yet the CSU has been increasingly deprived of the state funding needed to continue advancing California's future. Before you have a handout that's in red I'd like to walk you through the first handful of slides. On slide 2, what this shows you is the general fund appropriation over time. This dates back to 2007-8, right before the Great Recession hit. Shows you that at that point we had about $3 billion of general fund support. And we took it on the chin pretty hard there. Took a $1 billion cut down to 11-12 there. And slowly but surely, with your assistance as well, obviously with the administration, we are digging out of that hole, and we greatly appreciate that. But as you can see by the red bar over there in 15-16, that includes the governor's proposed amount of $119 million, and we're still a little bit short of our high water mark. Slide 3, the next page, shows you where the percentage of funding that has supported the university has gone over a multi-year period. So back in 2000, 2001.
Can I interrupt real quick?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, Assemblymember Ting has a quick question.
Just a quick question on the last slide. Are those all 2016 dollars or 2007 dollars, the slide number 2? Or those are just actual dollars at the time of funding?
These would be actual dollars through 14-15, and then 15-16 through 16-17 would be based on the governor's multi-year funding plan.
Okay, but these are actual dollars that were funded that year. You're not changing inflation and...
No, this is just...
Okay.
Yeah, this is just the numbers as they are. This next slide here, like I was saying, shows that back in 01-02, approximately 80% of the CSU operations were funded by general fund. About 20% supported by tuition fee revenue. And you could see during the recession in 11-12, it got to about a 50-50 balancing point. And you could see a little bit of separation here because of that investment, both in the general fund, but then also a lack of raising tuition revenues over those years. There's been a separation. But principally what I want to point out here is that the university is really limited to 2 principal funding sources, which is general fund and tuition revenue. Next slide is just another way of slicing those numbers a little bit. Basically, it shows you on a per student basis what the funding levels have been in the past. If you break it out there, just real quickly, you can see that it's almost a 50-50 split. Our high water mark, this is adjusted for inflation, Assemblymember Ting, but if you look at 2001 number, we're looking at approaching $14,000 per head, and we're still a little bit short of that number there. So at the same time that resources have been limited, the state of California approaches a drought of 1 million college graduates by 2025. In 10 years, the state will be 1 million bachelor's degrees short of the needs of California's economy. Earlier this year, the chancellor laid out an ambitious next phase of the CSU's ongoing effort to enhance student achievement. It's called the Graduation Initiative 2025. Through that initiative, the California State University has committed over the decade to educate an additional 100,000 degree-holding Californians above and beyond our current pace. This goal will help bridge that $1 million degree gap and expand the class of CSU alumni from 3 million to 4 million by 2025. If you allow me, I would like to veer into some of the graduation numbers by looking at the cohort that began 10 years ago on slide 5 of your handout. We chose that horizon because in our experience, nearly everyone who is going to graduate at all has done so after 10 years of starting. You look at this, we'll look at this using 5 ethnic designations here. Let's look first at how this cohort did at graduating within 4 years or less. You can see it here in gray. We see here that the dotted line holds up largely as expected, with the lower two groups outperforming by a little bit, no one group getting out of the 20% range. To improve on this rate, the CSU's opportunity is in the next group, in blue, those who graduate within 5 or 6 years. For all 5 ethnic categories, this is the largest group of graduates, and patterns from the first 4 years seem to continue on. And in purple, you see how they did after the 6-year mark. We see that there's more opportunity here for the Asian and Latino students than for the other groups. That is, that for these two groups, a focus on time to degree could improve overall graduation rates and close some gaps. But we also see that completion continues to matter, and that for each of these 5 groups, about a third to half of our students aren't graduating at all. This is the context in which we take on this work in the CSU, this graduation initiative 2025. It's multifaceted, and it's highly complicated. So now to slide 6, to our metrics that we have established for 2025. They look like this. For each of these 6 categories, we identify a baseline figure that represents what was most current as of October, when our Academic Affairs Division met with campus leadership to set these goals for 2025. Of the 2025 targets, let's look first at the 2 measures we used in the graduation initiative of 2009. Those are our 6-year graduation rate for freshmen and the gap in those rates by ethnicity. Now, our 6-year rate is already a little above the baseline you see here. It's just shy, I believe, of 54%. So we've actually eclipsed that goal. So we're on a good trajectory there. But we expect that getting up to 60% was still going to be quite challenging. And the target for a gap by ethnicity will be if anything, harder. That is because this is one that we actually missed on the first round of our initiative, filling the gap. As you probably know, if you've had some K-12 experience, that there is an achievement gap there. And because we represent and take on about a third of the high school graduating population, a lot of our population numbers are kind of pegging to those continuing trends out of K-12. So for the bridging that gap by ethnicity, we really consider that what we call one of our stretch goals, because it was a challenge the first go around. To the 2 goals you just saw, we've added 4 more to the 2025 initiative. First, you'll see new attention to our 4-year graduation rate. That's in response to interest from many in state leadership positions and obviously the broader public. As you see, making that move from 16% to 24% will represent a gain of about 50%, and that's ambitious from a percentage perspective. Also new this time, we will focus on our transfer students, looking at their 4-year and 2-year graduation rates. Our concern in this case is that the baseline numbers, especially on the 4-year rate, are already pretty high. The new associate degree for transfer, or SB 1440, will help us move some of those 4-year success into the 2-year group. And finally here, there's the new target on socioeconomic status as marked by the student's eligibility for federal financial aid. On some but not all of our campuses, we heard that the real impact on graduation may come not from ethnicity per se, but from how rich or poor those students are. We want to learn more about that and provide support system-wide for addressing it. So those are our goals for Graduation Initiative 2025, which are drawn on the opportunities we find in our most recent cohort data. So boiling down the numbers, the median time to degree for students starting with the CSU today as freshmen is already less than 5 years. It's 4.7 years. CSU believes that the Graduation Initiative 2025 will move that number even closer to 4 years. And if the governor's as the governor stated, students should not be the default financiers of higher education, then the state must step up its commitment, or it will see its public universities erode due to a lack of sufficient investments. Now, the CSU, we believe, has stepped up, especially during those tough fiscal times. Let me articulate a few of those ways that this has played out. The state's allocation, while increasing today, is still below 3-4 levels, a year in which universities serve 50,000 fewer students. In constant dollars today, we spend $8,000 less per degree than we did 10 years ago. And yet, through all this, the number of degrees earned over that same time span has increased by 20,000 annually. Our graduation rates are at all-time highs, and our time to degree is at all-time lows. Also, we save tens of millions of dollars a year through various efficiency measures in information technology, energy, financial services, insurance, and libraries, to name a few broad categories. In fact, in our last Board of Trustees meeting, we went pretty extensively through those lists of achievements and those savings. Those savings obviously mean less money coming out of students' pockets in the state treasury. So turning back to the handout, if you look at slide 7, this includes the components of the trustees' budget request. And really, these aren't rocket science. We're a university, right? And these are the inputs that make things happen. So walking through them real quickly, what we call our student success and completion initiatives are really ways to engage students on a basis to where they will persist and continue on. These are such things as hiring tenure track faculty, where they are engaged and included in the campus. They're also involving a lot of data analysis in order to do some analytics to figure out ways in which to reach students on a better basis. We also have here a proposal. Our request is to increase enrollments by 3%. That ends up being about 10,500 full-time equivalent students. We also are proposing a pretty reasonable 2% compensation pool increase for all of our employees. This next issue for $25 million is our investment in our capital infrastructure. As you'll recall, the state has gotten basically out of the business of building capital buildings for us. And so it's our responsibility now to try to do that on our own. And what we're trying to do here is we're trying to carve off some money that we can finance some projects, probably in the $300 to $400 million range of infrastructure. We're looking at some information technology upgrades, as well as obviously covering those mandatory costs. We cover our own healthcare costs. We also have to maintain that new infrastructure that we've rehabbed, so that would be energy and maintenance costs, that sort of thing. Grand total is $269 million. And if you flip over to the next page, that's the starting point, and this is how it plays out right now as the governor's budget stands. Clearly, the $0 mark there represents that we are not increasing tuition across the board. But because we are growing enrollment proposed by 3%, we would realize some net tuition revenue to the system that could be used to help pay for this plan. We fold in the governor's $120 million, leaving a funding gap of about $97 million. So I just wanted to lay that out for you as quickly as I could there. So if you turn over to slide 9, this really kind of shows you how our budget request stacks up with the amount of funding that the governor is willing to provide to us. Each of these color codes represents one of those items that I listed here. To the left is the whole number of resources that are available to us, both general fund and tuition revenue. And you can see we cover everything. But under the governor's proposal, we're actually quite limited in what we could actually invest in. Starting from the bottom, we have commitments to all of our labor agreements that provide this 2% increase. So we would obviously cover that. We also obviously have to cover our other mandatory costs like health and new space. We've actually already indicated to our campuses that based on the governor's multi-year plan that we could reasonably plan to increase enrollments by 1%. As you all know, the lead time in preparing for that, there's several months to 3/4 of a year. That leaves about $14 million to spread out to other items that obviously we probably wouldn't be able to get to a lot of deferred maintenance or student success initiative items. So after years of budget cuts and precipitous declines in state support, a proposal that maintains the status quo we think is not restoration, it's stagnation. It ends up being that The governor's amount of funding ends up providing us about 2% increase overall for our operating budget, and that's very close to in line with the rate of inflation. The trustees adopted a budget request of $217 million in state support, and with the fourth consecutive year of no tuition fee increases. We think that this request is reasonable given the scope of the state's economic expansion, passage of Prop 30, for education and the needs for both system and state. We hope that the legislature will at least add $97 million to the governor's proposal between now and June, and so that we can fully realize our common aims for students in the state. And we thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Well, I will note that when you came to our overview hearing a few months ago, is it the president or the chancellor? I always get confused for CSU. Chancellor. He said he hopes that the legislature will approve $97 million. And today you said at least $97 million. So the nuance is there. Yeah. Well, thank you. So now we'll go to questions from committee members. I just want to talk briefly on enrollment growth. This is a priority of this subcommittee and the budget committee as a whole to fully fund higher education in general, and certainly the CSU, the workhorse higher education institution with 4-year degrees in California, is a big piece of that. So I really wanted to figure out what it would take to fully fund enrollment growth, which is essentially serving everybody who's qualified and who applied. So my understanding last year there were roughly 30,000 students who applied who did not get in. And so when you go to your where is it? Your
be slide 10 would have that in there.
What page is that? Page 10? Okay.
Page 10.
Yeah.
So page 10, if you would allow me, Chair, this kind of shows over a multi-year period the number of students that we have admitted in gray,
yes,
and the number of students that we've had to deny access to.
Okay. So I'm going back and forth to page 7, where you actually have the budget request, and you say for the $103 million would get you 3% enrollment growth, and that covers some state money plus the majority of state money plus the money you get from student fee revenue. So what would it take, what's the percentage increase that you would need, and correspondingly state resources to fully fund the 30,000 number?
Well, it is a challenge, right? I don't think it's as simple as basically saying that we'll enroll 30,000 and everybody who wants
roughly
to apply, right?
Yeah.
Basically, our take rate is about a 50%. So if we offer a fully eligible student admission to our universities, the take rate is about 50%. Right now, what we're doing under our plan is that if we were to assume a 3% increase, that ends up being about 12,000 heads. So if you quickly just glance over to that slide 10, you're looking at the delta roughly of 30,000. But there's always going to be those instances where very high demand programs, such as like we just talked about at Cal Poly Pomona has a significant demand for their engineering programs. And so there are going to be those instances where students who want to get into those programs, there's just not enough seats no matter what. But obviously, I don't think this is one of those things where you can overnight provide funding to where we can instantaneously grow enrollments and cover the entire base. But I think over a multi-year period, I think we will get there. The one thing that's challenging with this too, and you might have heard this yesterday in the UC hearing, one of the commenters, I believe, from UC was talking about how the demography of the state isn't really lined up with what really is happening on the ground. So I think according to finance numbers, there's projections that high school graduates are flat or growing at a very small clip. But what is happening on the other side is that students are coming out of high school more prepared. They're completing more of their A through G requirements. From our institution's perspective, that number has grown by 60,000 over a handful of years. So I don't have a surefire answer
and
that I could just...
The third piece to that is that we need more and more people, regardless, to enter higher education to fulfill the jobs of today and tomorrow.
Yeah. And one of the core
I guess the last point I'm going to hit on in a second is I want to focus on really not tongue-in-cheek the ask of at least $97 million. So in order for you to hopefully fully fund enrollment growth in a reasonable, responsible way at CSU, what's the number that it would take from the state of California to really, push the envelope forward in serving every student who would like to attend the CSU system?
Well, if I'm speaking in terms of at least, then I would say at least at the 3%. We would be able to grow, I think, in this coming year by that amount. I would be hard pressed to give you a number higher than that at this point.
So the 3% assumes the 97 million.
Right.
What happens if there was 125 million from the state?
Right.
Or
Right.
150 or what have you? So would you be able to grow by more than 3% to go after some of these 30,000 students that were turned away last year?
I would venture to say yes. The question is, can I give you a firm number on that right now? I couldn't, but obviously we would try our best to grow higher. We have a lot of capacity on our campuses.
Well, that's one thing we'd ask too, is if,
Right.
I know we're getting short, but before we finalize the May revision, if the system would work with us and try to come back and figure out, a number for that.
Will do.
Okay, thank you. I think now, since this is a specific item, the general item related to the CSU system, we wanted to open it up to, questions from committee members first. Yes, Mr. Chavez.
I'm really intrigued by your slide number 5. 10-year projection cohort. And I don't know if you have it, probably LAO knows it, but when I first saw it, I was kind of shocked, thinking, 10 years, really? That's a metric? Is that unique to California or other state universities across the state, let's say Michigan, Illinois, Iowa, Kansas? Is that happening over there, or is it just unique to California? Yeah, LAO, do you know? Or?
I don't have the answer to that specific question. The federal reporting requirements usually look at 4- and 6-year graduation rates. That's usually the way we look at that. If you look at just 4- and 6-year graduation rates, CSU's 4-year rates are a little bit lower than what you might think are its other comparison institutions, other institutions that teach at the master's level. If you look at their 6-year graduation rates, they're about at the same level as their comparison organizations. So you might infer from that the time to degree is a little bit worse, but the 6-year graduation rates are about comparable.
Would you want to take a stab at that?
Well, I don't have a comparison nationwide either, but one thing that we do is we track each of the cohorts of students out 10 years, as is depicted here. And that really is to just make sure that we've covered everybody in terms of grabbing them whether they have graduated or not. As you can see here, oftentimes a lot of the focus at the federal level and on the reporting levels is on this 4-year and 6-year graduation rate, right? But what happens if students are still, like a lot of our students who are actually trying to make ends meet in order to go to college, who are living kind of a dual life of working and going to school? What this purple bar over here is showing you that there is still persistence even after that, kind of that number of, 6 years, they should be out by then, right? 4 years is the optimal, 6 is the looked at as more of the national, that's probably about the right amount. But you can see here that we still have pretty big population of students that still persist even beyond the 6 years. And we're looking at, through our graduation initiative, an attempt to try to, collapse all of those bars so that our gray bar gets a little bit longer and our blue bar shrinks and our purple bars shrink there too.
And I guess the demographics of this, like a purple bar, is that a single parent who's decided to go back to school when they're 30 years old? I mean, or is that the 19-year-old kid who went there who'd like to go skiing all the time at Lake Tahoe that decided he wanted to stay at Davis till it's done? I mean, who is this person?
I don't have an answer for you.
I've also heard this, and you may want to comment because it gets to the real issue. We're trying to let me back off. What is the question we're really trying to do? We're trying to make sure we have an educated population with degrees. We can look at slice numbers and everything, but at what point is it systems that we put in, or is it the culture of the colleges? Because I've heard, and I don't know if you want to comment on this, I've heard that it's interesting that if the price of tuition goes up, graduation times go down. Have you seen that?
that is one tangible change that can occur when tuition rises. It can push graduation quicker through.
Does anybody want to take a stab why that's happening?
I think it's practical reality, right? I mean, if you're attending a university for $40,000 a year, there's much more of a pressure to complete as quickly as possible. Now, at the same time, you're probably able to offer a lot more of those courses so that you can complete in a 4-year period. We're kind of in the middle, right? We're a low tuition, high aid institution, and what happens is that students can really through the state and through our tuition rates are able to actually work their way through college and possibly make these kind of 5-year and 6-year plans versus kind of a 4-year plan. But I would not recommend that you would, as a strategy, as a state, raise tuition in order to incentivize students to go through quicker. That's one of those things where it's a opportunity cost, right? When you have a situation where you have a student for 5 or 6 years paying over that time maybe 10 or 20,000 more, you're talking about actually loss of income and loss of opportunity to earn an income. So that's one of the watershed or one of the great things about the CSU is that it is an affordable institution, and that people do to this day still have the flexibility to be able to manage it on a as needed basis as they go forward, as quickly as 4 and do it as long as they need to get it done.
You ought to later on look at what you just said and look at the logic of it as you started it. I was following you as you went and said, yes, that's correct, and then you kind of dissolved in that. LAO, would you like to comment on it?
We would also note that it appears that when tuition rises, sometimes graduation rates also, students are more likely to get out quicker. That's been reported to us also by campus officials as well. In addition, there are also sometimes certain financial aid incentives built in. For example, to be considered for financial aid, a student must enroll in 12 units a semester. However, usually to be able to graduate within 4 years, you usually have to enroll in at least 15 units to complete 120 units within 4 years. So there are certain financial incentives that are built in that can influence whether or not students, at what point at which students graduate.
How many hours is a student in class for 12 hours, 12 semester hours in the semester?
Well, so a credit hour, a single credit hour is supposed to represent 1 hour of in-class time. I'm going to get it wrong, either 2 or 3 hours of out-of-class time. And so a student is in class, if it's a 3-unit class, which is pretty common for a semester class, they would be in class for about 3 hours.
3 hours a week?
A week, yeah.
3 hours a week. So if you had 4 of them, you'd be in class 12 hours a week.
That's right.
In a 40, 50-hour week when I remember when I was in school. So
that wouldn't include that just is the in-class time, not the time you devote out of class to completing your studies.
I remember that when I was in college, too. I thought that was a bogus number. I mean, unless you're reading with your lips moving or something. I think there's a cultural issue. Because I remember when I was there, everybody knew you had to take 15 hours. It was like, and a lot of us would take 17, so you could do a little quicker, or you could take a shorter deal, whatever. So, is that common? People taking like 15 hours, or is it strictly it's an access issue? Because when I was in school, everybody took 15. That was the standard. If you weren't taking 15, people look at you and say, "Well, what are you doing?" I mean. Monday, you did your Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, 3 classes, and your Tuesday, Thursday, 2 classes, and you rolled through there, and that was your 15 hours. So, is that not the culture anymore?
One of the things we do is we take the total number of actual bodies enrolled at CSU and we convert that to full-time equivalents. It's about 80%. So that suggests that about the average course load is about 12 units a semester for a student at CSU.
But my question is that the culture now? Is that the expectation?
It's reasonable to expect that there are certain incentives in place that might incentivize a student to only take 12 units. Again, for example, there are certain financial aid incentives. They only have to take 12 to qualify for financial aid.
CSU, you want to comment on that? It's your school. Is it the culture to do 12, or?
I would say that I would say this. I think that our baseline full-time equivalent students are actually increasing over time. We are actually moving the needle in terms of student loads. In fact, that's one of the challenges that we face, is that as students are inclined to want to take more coursework from that 12 or 13 or 14 unit base, that it's harder to, on an aggregate, to offer a series of courses or number of courses in order to facilitate that need. So I think the needle is moving in the right direction. You see that in our graduation numbers, these raw numbers that I have in front of you, that with graduation rates going up and the timeliness of it going up over time, that you are seeing, because of that, you are seeing actually a higher unit load that is being taken on a regular basis than in the past.
So you're trying to change the culture to get to 15 hours?
Absolutely.
And if you look at in this chart, number 5, and I'll stop with this, if you look at this chart, if we were able to get people in 4 years or 4 years in a semester, you would open up whole areas for other opportunities for people to go to college.
That's right.
Better throughput. That's one of the goals of the chancellor, is to make sure that the students that we have, that there is better throughput, and ultimately what that ends up being is more graduates on the whole, right? When you have better throughput, you're able to offer those courses. You're much better positioned to have an economy that has more baccalaureate holders than not.
I remember sitting with my daughter, having her doing the economics of how much money it was costing her there, and if she got out earlier, and she started making money, how it would help in her life. And she graduated from Davis in 3 years and 2 quarters because she was paying her own way. And she came out with the BS, not a BA. I think we need to change the culture, and you need to help us do it.